The U.S. has three main research bases in Antarctica. The biggest one is on the coast, sort of near New Zealand. It's called McMurdo. We came in on a C-17, which is a jet. They're a little louder than a regular plane, but it's not a bad ride altogether. Kind of the amazing thing is you're landing literally on a piece of ice over the ocean. It's called the Ross Ice Shelf. It's about a little more than a tenth of a mile thick, the ice is there. So it's a big hunk of ice, and they can land planes on it, and they basically set up the airport out there. The control tower and the storage buildings and everything else are all put on skis because they move it around depending on when the climate makes it more favorable to have the airport closer to McMurdo. And you sort of, when you land, you almost don't even realize, but that's what it is below you is ocean. McMurdo was first founded back in the 50s, and some of the buildings look like they've been around for close to that length of time. They're kind of like barracks. I mean, it almost sort of reminds me of like the former Soviet Union or just a typical warehouse district in a major U.S. city, just metal sheet-paneled buildings, very Spartan. It's like a small town in the middle of nowhere, and really in the middle of nowhere because there's not even another small town, that you can even drive to. A way of getting around is by helicopter. They have these little tent sites that the researchers are living in. They can walk to some of them, but they don't want to put vehicles out there. Matter of fact, one of the things they pointed out to us from the helicopter ride was some tire tracks along a valley that were left by a New Zealand research team that was there 40 years ago, and they're still there. There's nothing there to wash it away. Antarctica is about 97, 98% covered in snow or ice. Very little bit of it is actually bare ground exposed. And one of the areas where there is bare ground exposed is an area called the Dry Valleys. A couple people made the comparisons to Mars. And really, from a scientific perspective, they're using it for that reason because they found these life forms that actually dry out entirely. Then when water is added to them months or even years later, they revive. And it sort of gives them all kinds of insights into what the prospects are for life existing on other planets in which the conditions are pretty harsh. When we were there, it was exactly 100 years from the day when Robert Scott's expedition reached the South Pole. Unfortunately for Robert Scott, the Norwegian team led by Amundsen had reached the South Pole about a month earlier. When he finally got to the South Pole, he was obviously devastated, and then the worst tragedy was that his group they all died on the way back. Scott had two huts. There's one that's virtually at McMurdo Station, and there's one a few miles up the coast. Amazingly, what you're seeing in the picture is a box of sugar and all kinds of other provisions that are still there. That box of sugar still has sugar in it. It's quite astounding. And it's also a very stark reminder for people there where they really are and sort of the magnitude of what it is to be down there and to try and survive down there. I mean, it's a fascinating piece of history. There's tensions over minerals and resources around the world. The Russians are sort of making claim to the North Pole, and there's worries that some of that might go on at the South Pole. There's already existing claims on parts of Antarctica by Britain, by Argentina, by Chile, by Australia, and that's all been held off for now by the fact that there's the Antarctic Treaty that basically says nobody can claim anything. But that's sort of enforced in some ways just by the fact that the scientists are all there and sort of physically laying claim to the continent, and it's probably a good thing. I mean, it's sort of like in some ways, a scientific paradise, and it's a little village of scientists and other people who are adventurers who are there, and it's a really kind of an amazing little world.